I'm Randy Cassingham, publisher, founder, supervising magician at thisistrue.com, the longest running entertainment newsletter on the internet. Let's get right to it. Today's topic is NASA and Mars. Chuck in Texas writes, I'm sure you have read Andy Weir's novel The Martian or seen the movie. Combined with your experience with NASA and friends, what is your opinion on how long it will be before we have a full-blown Mars mission? Or if we will ever have one? Definitely a good question. But you're asking a guy from JPL, which is NASA's Center for Unmanned Probes. So from my point of view, we've had full-blown missions to Mars since the late 60s and 70s with the Mariner flybys, the Viking orbiters and landers. Then we had a gap in the 80s and most of the 90s, but we've had a continuous presence on Mars since. But I know what your real question is a manned mission. But let's get to Andy Weir first. Weir's father was a physicist at Sandia National Laboratories, which is an FFRDC, a federally funded research and development center, and so is NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So an FFRDC is a usually private, typically a university, that has a contract from a specific governmental sponsor. In JPL's case, of course, that's NASA. Sandia's case, it's Department of Energy, I think. And they're dedicated to the mission of their sponsoring agency. So, yeah, JPL is pretty dedicated to NASA, and its mission and its specialty is unmanned probes. But anyway, so Weir worked at Sandia a little bit too, so he's clearly absolutely got a mind lock on what this kind of facility is. And so it's not surprising to me that JPL figures very prominently, even though it's about unmanned missions in his novel to save the astronaut that went to Mars. I mean, if any NASA center knows a lot about Mars and how to get there as fast as possible and to do things there, it's JPL. So, that was really realistic to me. So I was aware of him writing the book, and actually for a while I thought he probably worked at JPL, but did not. He's basically been a writer for all of his main professional career. He did some programming. That's how he started at Sandia as a teen. But he did it professionally also, and then turned to writing. And he wrote several things before The Martian, but The Martian was his first novel, and of course his big breakthrough. So, and his mother was an electrical engineer, and so we're talking about a pretty nerdy family to start with. He was born to write The Martian, but he was still humble enough to publish the chapters online and get feedback. And I was too busy to participate in any of that, but I'm willing to bet lots of people working in the Mars program at JPL did participate in that, and that's part of why it's so realistic. Although, I only watched the movie. I didn't really have time to participate in his iterative process to write the book. I didn't really have time to read the book, although I've had time here and there, and I've chosen the other things to use up my reading time. Some of the things were kind of improbable. For instance, the whole thing that set up the crisis on Mars was a big windstorm. Yes, there are windstorms on Mars. That's one of the reasons the probes, the rovers and the landers fail over time, in large part because of the light dust that gathers on their photovoltaic cells, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that's due to wind. But we're talking about a really thin atmosphere, so even if you have a 200-mile-an-hour wind, you're not going to be knocked over by it. Certainly, things are not going to go flying and penetrate into the guts of an astronaut, because a 200-mile wind of virtually no substance is still virtually no substance. So I found it inventive, entertaining, scientifically plausible. But your real question is, what is your opinion on how long it will be before we have a full-blown manned Mars mission, or will we ever have one? I think it's not likely that we have the political will to pull it off, or maybe even the money. And I'm speaking specifically of NASA. I don't think that the way we work NASA is to spread a project out through multiple states, so that multiple Congress critters and senators will support it, because it will bring jobs to their districts. Great way to get something done politically, terrible way to get actual work done. That's how we got the shuttle. The shuttle was really cool. I loved the shuttle. It was really neat. I thought it was some amazing technology, but it was one of the most inefficient and expensive launch systems ever created. It was ridiculous. When I was at JPL, I became aware that a mission on the shuttle cost about $1 billion. $1 billion. For doing little things like launching a satellite. Well, you could launch a satellite for $100 million really easily. I think that was probably around the cost. I'm just winging it, but the probe to Pluto. I'm just going to make a wild guess that it was $100 million. I'll look it up and print it on the screen here what it really was. But it wasn't $1 billion. But that's what you get when you throw humans into the loop. You can't suffer as many failures and politically survive. So do I think in that kind of environment we could have the political will and funding to send humans to Mars? And my answer is no. If it happens, it'll probably happen because the richest man in the world, who happens to own a very inventive and much, 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 much cheaper launch company, SpaceX, I think it's much more likely that he would be able to do it than NASA. And I'm okay with that. It's like, do we really need to spend $100 billion to get a couple of astronauts to Mars? Or can we let him do it for a lot less? And, as much as I have problems with Elon Musk, you go, dude. Sure, get us to Mars. Do I think he'll really do it? Maybe. He's crazy enough to spend that kind of money, and he's got his reasons, and I'm not sure that his reasons are valid. So here's why I think it's a bad idea to go to Mars, or really even a much more likely scenario is some kind of orbiting city, like a ring world. Thinking back to Dyson Spheres and ring worlds of Larry Niven, who's one of my favorite science fiction authors, even before he became a premium This Is True subscriber. I've met him years and years and years ago. I was just going to do this update with the slides, but I realized that visually impaired viewers, and sure they would use that term too, I think, would not be able to see the updates. So the New Horizons mission to Pluto launched in 2006 on the Atlas V 551 configuration, the first time an Atlas launched with a third stage. I was at Cape Canaveral to watch this launch because I worked on the Pluto pre-project during my time at JPL. I did not find a confirmed price for the launch, but it was likely at the higher end of $100 to $150 million, which is worth about $240 million today. Falcon Heavy launch is $100 million today. The reason I think that there's a real problem with us leaving the planet and surviving as a species is we're only just starting to figure out how tied we are to the planet. We're just starting to figure out the microbiome, what's in our gut that not only runs our bodies but runs our brains. That so many things are interconnected with where we grew up, planet Earth. How many drugs do we figure out will solve a lot of problems that have to do with microorganisms or plants that we didn't know about a generation ago, let alone 20 generations ago? And what are we going to find out in the next generation or 20 generations? That really, my guess is that everything we need to solve our medical problems is somewhere on Earth. And maybe AI will help find those things. Maybe AI will help us synthesize those things. But that's a lot of maybes, and then where will we get raw materials once AI says, all you need to do is this, and you can cure cancer? Far-fetched, maybe. But if it does, will we have the raw materials on a spacecraft or on Mars? Or do we need to, we need that raw material that's only on Earth? So, I'm not sure we'll ever get off this planet in a sustained way and remain healthy and survive generation after generation after generation for hundreds, thousands, millions of years. I'm not sure about that. It doesn't mean we're doomed, because one of the biggest pollution sources, probably the ultimate pollution of Earth, isn't heavy metals or gases, it's probably heat. If we built nuke plants to scrub the atmosphere of carbon dioxide, the problem isn't having enough electricity. It's having enough cooling to keep the planet from still going supercritically warm. There was a science fiction story, and I'm afraid I've long lost the memory of what it was, but some planet in the story had figured out that heat was the ultimate pollutant. And so what they did is they developed a technology to move their planet away from the sun a little bit, cool down a little bit, get a little farther from their sun. And as they progressed technologically, they realized there's nothing really to keep them orbiting their sun. Why don't they just make the planet a spaceship and move out and explore the cosmos on the best spaceship they could possibly have, which is their planet? Very inventive story, and if somebody knows what that story is, please put it in the comments, because I'd love to read it again. It was in college that I read this story. I have no idea the author, the title. Maybe I should ask AI if it knows what that story is. ChatGPT says heat as the ultimate pollution is from British scientist Kit Pedler's The Quest for Gaia, 1979. Pedler died in 1981. But that's a non-fiction book, not a science fiction short story. So the story I'm remembering may have been sparked by Pedler's thoughts. But Chatty G goes on to say it sounds like an aspect of the known space series where an alien species, Pearson's puppeteers, combined their home world with other planets into a Klemperer rosette to flee a galactic catastrophe. The amusing, to me, irony: the known space series was written by Larry Niven. The Ringworld series is set within the known space universe, and the first Ringworld book was published in 1970. I did read Ringworld and probably some of its sequels and prequels way back when, but I'm still reasonably sure that the story I'm thinking of is indeed a short story that is not part of Niven's work. Maybe Larry will see this video and comment if he knows what the story is. I did have the opportunity years ago to tell Larry in person that his book with Jerry Pournelle, Lucifer's Hammer, scared the crap out of me because it was so damned plausible. He didn't say a word in reply, but he smiled. It's a very compelling idea, and you take all of your raw materials with you. Will plants really survive without having the sun to warm and nourish them? Another interesting question. But, you know, I think of these things and wonder if we have a possibility of leaving the planet not having replenishment of our microorganisms that we eat, even accidentally, little bits of dirt and what comes with that dirt might be what we absolutely need to survive. And if we leave the dirt and never have dirt ever again, or at least not dirt we grew up with, Martian dirt probably doesn't count. One of the things that I'm aware of in The Martian, he mixed feces from the astronauts into the Martian soil to grow his potatoes so he'd have something to eat. We have since learned that the Martian dirt would absolutely be toxic to the plants, and that wouldn't work. So, you know, little things like that we haven't really thought through. I'm sure there's some astrobiologists who are thinking about this, but I think as a species, we're probably doomed to stay here. But I do still hope that we explore, probably mostly with probes, which are a heck of a lot cheaper than sending humans. So that's my, let's see, how'd you put it? My experience with NASA and friends. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe. If you haven't done so already, it does actually help. And I'm Randy Cassingham, and I'll talk at you later.